Alright guys, here's what you missed when we were in class the other day. So, on page 21 in your interactive binder, we put this page in before Christmas. So if you look here at the top of the page, you're going to see that we have a bunch of different landmarks. So you guys know we have the minimum and the maximum. We also call that my lower extreme and my upper extreme. In the middle, we can find my median. My median is going to be called my Q2. Now we're going to go a little bit more specific from the landmarks we learned back in Unit 1, and we're going to move on and we're going to actually take the data and in between the minimum and the middle, we're going to break it in half again. We're going to call that our Q1 or our lower quartile, and in between my middle and my highest number, I'm going to break it in half again. So you can see the whisker here is 25%. This box represents 25%. This represents 25% and 25% of the data. There are the same number of points in each group or each quartile. It's just that depending on how close the numbers are, is shown by the range here. So here are our notes. We put this in again before Christmas. So here's my box and whisker plot. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put our numbers in order from least to greatest. Now, after I do that, I'm going to go and I'm going to find all of my landmarks. So I took all my numbers here that were put in order, and now I'm writing mine on notebook paper. You're going to go ahead and write yours right here in your paper. Okay, I just put mine on notebook paper to make it a little easier. So I'm going to go ahead and circle, this is my minimum, and here's my maximum. I double checked first of all to make sure that there were 11 pieces of data, and there were. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cross off my lowest and my highest, 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 my lowest and my highest. Here's my middle number, so that's my median, okay? Then from there, when I have one middle number, you're going to see this is in your notes down here on the bottom. When we find the Q1 and the Q3, when there is one middle number right here, when there's an odd number of data, you're going to cross out the median. When there's two middle numbers, you're going to include them. We're also going to talk about something called IQR, which is interquartile range. So back here, when I have one middle number, I ignore that middle number, and I actually look at the numbers below it, and I look at the numbers above it to find my group. So right now I split it into half. 50% is here, 50% is here. I want to break it into quarters, so I'm going to do the same thing. And notice how I'm crossing in the opposite direction. Lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Here's my middle number. We're going to call that my Q1. I come up here above my median, lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Here's my middle number. That's my Q3. So the 5 numbers I circled, minimum, Q1, median or Q2, Q3, and my maximum are my 5 number summary. So after I order my data, we just found my 5 number summary, which you're going to see is listed right here. After we do that, we're going to create our number line. So we're going to take our 5 dots, our 5 number summary, and we are going to, we are going to draw my line. So it's a little difficult to see, but my first number, my minimum, was 19. So see how I drew a little line here at 19? My Q1 was 22, so I drew a line there. My median was 25, drew a line. My Q3 was 34. And my last number, my maximum, was 40. So I drew my 5 lines for my 5 number summary. And then after I create that number line, I'm going to create the box and the whisker. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it right here. Here's my box. And then here are my whiskers. So when I make a box plot, all I'm doing is I'm going to put my numbers in order from least to greatest. I'm going to find my 5 number summary, and we'll practice that again. I'm going to draw the 5 number summary. There's lines there. I'm going to create my box and then draw my whiskers. Now, if you look down here, feel free to pause as you need to. we also have some pieces of information. So box and whisker plots are useful to us in some ways, but they're also really not useful. So go ahead and pause. You can see that they're helpful to show the distribution or the spread of each quartile. They show the 5-number summary. The problem with them is, just like histograms, they don't show each piece of data, and we don't know if there are outliers. Now, on the back of your paper, we glued in 2 problems that are numbered 2 and 4, which is kind of weird, but that's just how we numbered them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do them over here on my notebook paper so you can see how we do them. So my first problem, I took and counted. There are 11 numbers. And I double checked there are 11 numbers here. So really quickly, I'm going to go through. I'm going to find my minimum and my maximum, pretty easy. To find my median, I cross off lowest and highest, lowest and highest, lowest and highest. I happen to have one middle number. There's my median. Guys, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with the focus on this camera. After I do that, because I have one middle number, I'm going to kind of put a little X through it and ignore it, even though I know it's an 11, because I'm going to need that a little bit later. So here's my lower numbers and my set of higher numbers. I'm going to do the same thing again. Lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Here's my middle number. That's my Q1. Lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Here's my Q3. Keep in mind, when I have one middle number, I need to simply ignore it and look at the numbers above and below it. Now, once I take the 6, the 9, the 11, the 12, and the 14, and I graph them here, I draw those 5 lines. So again, 6, 9, 11, 12, 14, connect the middle 3 to make my box. Here are my whiskers. Here's my middle 50% of my data. Here's a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, and a quarter. I can find my range by taking my maximum minus my minimum, right? So that tells me the distance between them. To find my IQR, I look at Q3, which is 12. I subtract 9, which is my Q1, and I get 3. Let's look at the second problem, which happens to be numbered question 4. So I went and I put my numbers in order, from least to greatest. You guys are probably going to be seasick by the time you're done watching this. Sorry. Okay, but they're my numbers. I'm going to circle my lowest and my highest. That's my minimum and my maximum. Make sure you're taking these notes on yours. Then I'm going to find my middle number by crossing out my lowest and highest. So lowest and highest, lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Now you're going to notice I have 2 middle numbers. When I have 2 middle numbers, you guys know what to do. You add them up. 6 plus 8 is 14. 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. So my middle number is actually going to be 7. Now, when I had one middle number up above here, remember I crossed it out? But if you remember our notes, let me turn back here. Our notes said when there are 2 middle numbers, we don't cross them out. We actually include both of them. So let me show you what that looks like. You are actually going to use the 6, and it's going to go with the lower half of the numbers. And this 8 is going to go up here with the upper half of the numbers. So even though I found my median of 7, I'm now including the 6 down here in the lower half, and I'm including the 8 in the upper half. Cross off in opposite directions, lowest and highest. I have to find the middle of those 2 numbers. I have 4 and 6. I adds to 10. Half of 10 is 5. So there's my Q1. And then here, I'm going to cross off my 8 and my 24. In between 11 and 13, when I add them together, I get 24. Divided by 2, I get 12. So if you look now, the numbers that I had circled are 2, 5, 7, 12, and 24. Even though we had a bunch circled down here, I used these numbers that were circled to find the average or the middle of them. So 2, 5, 7, 12, and 24. You can see I marked off 2. In between 4 and 6 was 5. Here's my 7, my 12, and my 24. I made my box with the middle 3, connected my whiskers. So basically, those are the notes for finding how to find and to calculate not the IQR, to calculate the 5-number summary, and to make a box plot. In class, we started with journal page 151. So when we looked at our math message here, it asked us to find the minimum and the maximum. So here's my minimum, here's my maximum. I'm supposed to draw a vertical line and a vertical line. To find my middle number, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to cross off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the lowest. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the highest. I'm going to go with the lowest and the highest, a lowest and a highest, a lowest. Now this highest one here is part of my upper group because here's my middle number. And all of these numbers below that number are in the bottom half. And this number here, plus all of these, are in the half larger than the median. So my median is here. I'm going to draw my line. It's important to note, though, because I have one middle number, I only look at the numbers below and above. If I cross off in the opposite direction, lowest and highest, here's 2 lowest and 2 highest. Lowest and highest, lowest and highest. Here's my middle number. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the opposite direction, hey, look at that. Right there. They asked me to draw a vertical line. What are the numbers? Well, there was my minimum. Here was my Q1. Here was my median. Here was my Q3, and here is my maximum at 100. Okay, we're going to take those numbers and we're going to use them to help us with our 5-number summary. We call this our 5-number summary, actually, and we're going to use that to create our box plot. So I'm going to draw my lines. Same spots that I did up above, but now the dots are not there. I take my middle 3, just like we did on our interactive binder page. Make the box. There are my whiskers. And you're going to notice, okay, box plots talk a lot about range, okay, and the box sizes are different. The same number of points, if you look up here, the same number of points are in each. Here's my first quartile. There's the same number of points in there as there are in this quartile, as there are in this, whoops, I went too far, as there are in this quartile right here, as there are in this quartile. So there's the same amount of data in each one. They each represent 25%. But if you notice here, see how a lot of these numbers are really close together? That makes the range of this quartile very small. So which one has the greatest range? Well, it's obvious that if you look here, this one, quartile 4, because this is my first quartile, my second, my third is just this little teeny tiny one here, and my fourth one has the largest range. Why does it? Well, because it says to explain the relationship between the range and the way the box plot is drawn. Well, the numbers in this last quartile here, from here to here, are more spread out. So therefore, the distance between them is greater. Okay. A couple more things to point out while I'm thinking about it too. If I find IQR, that would be my middle 50%, because this is 25%. This is 25%. So I would start here with my 81. I'm going to subtract. And when I do that, I have an IQR, or an interquartile range, of 12. So the middle 50% has a spread, or a distribution, of 12. So box plots, like the notes we put in our interactive binder, are not very helpful, because if I didn't have this information above here, I would have no idea. If I was simply just given this right here, I would have no idea what my numbers are. The only thing that I can learn from this is that here's my minimum, my maximum, my middle is about here, and if I split the data into pieces, I can see that there's a lot of numbers, well, not a lot of numbers, but in my third quartile, there the numbers are very close together. The higher numbers, my numbers are more spread out. we move on to our next page, which is 152, you're going to see that there's a couple more problems. I'm going to really quickly highlight this just so you can see. This is my first quartile. Here is my second quartile. Here is my third quartile. And here is my fourth quartile. You can see the distance and the length of each of those. Okay. Now, first question asks, where is the Q3 for Class A? Well, remember, here's my minimum, Q1, median, Q3. When I follow this down, it looks to me like it takes us to 83. Why don't you pause the video, see if you can try number 2 and number 3, and then unpause, we'll talk about that. Okay, the Q1 for B2, here's my minimum. This would be my Q1 right here, so when I follow it down, I get 65. And to find the range for Class C, to find range, I take the minimum and the maximum, which happens to be 96 and 45. I subtract them. I'm left with an answer of 51. Now, question 4 says, which class has the greatest range of times? Range is the distance between the minimum and the maximum. Minimum and maximum. And you don't even need to do any calculations. You should hopefully be able to see that Class B from here to here has the largest spread. What does it tell me about the class? So range is another measure of spread or distribution. What does it tell me about the class? It tells me that they're very inconsistent, right? They have scores that were very low to super high. And actually they have the lowest and the highest score for the plank challenge for those classes. In which classes or which class were the students' times closest to one another? Okay, so if they were the closest, the scores were very close, this would mean the range is small, right? So which one has the smallest, meaning that the scores were close? Well, that would be Class A right there. How do we know that? Because it has the smallest range. Now here's a tough question. Which class's students held the plank position longest? And we had some good discussions about this in class. So if I look up here, kind of could maybe argue some different classes. So if I look, I have a lot of writing happening on here, so this might be a little bit difficult to see. So let's see if I can get rid of some of these lines here. Okay. So if we tried to compare these, some kids said Class A was the best. Why was Class A the best? Well, because they said that the upper 50% right here was not quite as good as Class B, but when you look at their lower 50%, it looks like it's much better than Class B. So even though if I compare their medians, Class B is the highest median, they said that overall Class A was more consistent because the range was smaller and all the numbers tended to be on the larger side. So some classes, some groups, and some kids said A. I already kind of explained the reason for Class B. Some of the students said, well, Class B is better. If you compare the upper 50% to all three of these, Class B wins. They have the highest median here compared to the other two, and they had the highest score. They also said, even though they had the lowest score here, it's possible that one student was here at 35 and all the other students were here above a minute or 60 seconds, but because this one student was here, it stretched this quartile out. Problem is, we don't know because we don't know what the data is. So we made the decision, we probably could have argued A or B. Didn't really get anyone to argue C, because if you look at the medians, has the lowest median. It doesn't have the smallest minimum, but it does have a smaller one. And if you look here, it's pretty stretched out. Okay. And then which class has the most students? Well, we don't know the answer. We put a big old IDK here. I don't know. Because box plots don't tell us how much information is in them.